So the title of my talk this morning is Ethical Reflecting. So in 2016, Sati Sangha was born out of an ethical crisis in our former Sangha. Though the crisis was complex, one simplified version is that we as a whole normalized an imbalance of power between the head teacher and the rest of the Sangha. And I remember over the years seeing signs of all is not well with the way we were expanding and growing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I was way too steeped in the inner circle at that time. And reflecting back, as I often do, I can see more signs. But because I was so focused then on teaching, the signs were perplexing and confusing. They didn't make sense to me. So ethical imagination, and this is a term we're borrowing from Qi and John, the two scholars that taught an ethical course that a lot of us have been taking and looking at. It's a term that basically says, what if, what are the possibilities that could happen around ethics? But those what ifs weren't really apparent at the time. And it wasn't that I intentionally didn't think about them or think about Sangha ethics, but they weren't even on my radar. It was a very naive assumption that I had. We were doing good work, and we were going to continue doing good work as we always had. That's just the way it was in my mind. So saying this here again, it may seem repetitive, but I really want to emphasize that some of the ethical imagination, some of the what ifs can be very hard to imagine in the moment. They're clearer in hindsight. So not only is our way of meditating a training in ethics, but it's a training in ethical reflecting. The reflecting back on our meditation is a training in ethical reflecting. And it's still a little astonishing to me at this time that I didn't understand that nonprofits needed systematic plans with how to handle ethics and how to implement them. It feels like a younger self when I look back at it this 10, 12 years ago. Our Sangha was focused on the meditation practice, and we weren't educated to create backup plans like grievance policies, ethical statements, transparency commitments, even though we were aware of problems that had happened in other Sanghas. And interestingly enough, our teachers, we had ethical agreements that we all signed, but there was really no way to enforce them for most of the minor infractions or for even something more serious. So upon founding Sati Sangha and deciding to create it as a nonprofit, I had to come up with plans. You have to be able to actually create a nonprofit. And this took ethical imagination, though I didn't use those words at the time. And it was done out of necessity and in the aftermath of quite a bit of grief. We created a council to help establish and implement policies. We hired a website designer to help convey the principles and ethics that we were now trying to state and articulate. And really, sometimes I felt like I was shouting them. After any type of crisis, you are really trying to, let's say, make sure that you don't miss anything. So on the home page, we had something, we embedded it into every page of the website. And I just remember that feeling of wanting to clarify every little detail to make sure nothing ever happened again, which of course you can't. Things happen. And you can't make sure that nothing happens again, but you can take ethical safeguards, which are not foolproof, but they are backup systems that help action and repair, compassion, kindness, that you can rely on in the midst of crisis, because it's very hard to think about those things in the midst of crisis. But as more time passed, I was able to start envisioning a more realistic future while looking and reflecting upon the past. And I think this is a basis for ethical imagination, that you can look at the future while you're in the present and you can reflect upon the past. So it's a really quite a complex thing to have this imagination of the future while you're standing where you're at now, while you're holding your past. And in 2018, Nelly and I started teaching more retreats together. We imagined what we wanted clarified in our Sangha about the practice, about the way we interacted. And we brainstormed and spent many hours on articulating this in our teaching. And it took quite a bit of effort, study, practice, your help. And dare I say, we're using that kind of language that we used yesterday, dare I say ethical imagination started to become fun. That it was what I mean by that is that it was integrated into the Buddhist teachings, into the Dharma teachings. And we found creative ways to talk about it. And it wasn't something set off separate, like a chore that we had to do. It really became part of our teaching. So in 2019, I was able to put some of our ethical direction into a course called Ethical Reflecting for Buddhist teachers and mindfulness teachers. And my intention was to pass along what I learned, what we had learned. And recently I've been reviewing the modules, not only because ethics is the topic this week here at the Daily Online, but because I've been invited to be on a panel at Northwestern University. And it's in September, and it's put on by a fantastic team of women who really focus on healing and education for meditators after physical, emotional, financial, spiritual, and sexual abuse in Buddhism. So it's a team of dedicated women, and two of the women are writing a book that will come out in 2025, and they're really sincerely opening up the discussion and conversation so that more survivors' voices are heard within Buddhist communities. So Sati Sangha was born out of an ethical crisis, and I used to have some shame around this, but it's really worn away for now, because I can imagine it would come back with certain conditions. But I'll leave you with something of what I wrote on the ethicalreflecting.org, if you want to check it out, for teachers, because I find it's also true now for us as a Sangha. As an ethical safeguard, it takes a while to cultivate the taste of reflection. It's a different way of learning or knowing. Subtle, nuanced, complex, sophisticated, as in matured over time. Using Buddhist teachings, fine-tune your internal ethical compass. And this is a phrase I'm borrowing from Nelly. She uses it for her CE ethics classes, an ethical compass, internal ethical compass. So fine-tune this through exploring your own particular patterns and habits, your Sangha's particular patterns and habits, those patterns and habits that put you at risk for ethical misunderstandings. So I'll end my talk here today. Thank you for listening.